What's cracking YouTube? Bruce here from Jump Mathematics. Another 2 video series, how we're going to differentiate the product of 2 functions and the quotient of 2 functions. The first of the 2 videos is how to differentiate the product of 2 functions, the product rule. So if we have h of x equals f of x times g of x, what is h prime of x? In other words, how do we differentiate the product of 2 functions? So the first thing that we're going to do, of course, is we're going to write down h prime equals limit as delta x goes to 0. This h of x plus delta x minus h of x over delta x. The difference quotient. We've seen this a lot of times now. So then what I did is I plugged in f of x times g of x in for h of x. So I have f of x plus delta x times g of x plus delta x minus f of x times g of x all over delta x. So now I'm going to pull a really clever little trick here. This is equal to the limit as delta x goes to 0, f of x plus delta x, g of x plus delta x. Haven't changed anything yet. First, I'm going to subtract f of x times g of x plus delta x. Then, since I subtracted, I'm going to add it back in. F of x times g of x plus delta x. Then here I have minus f of x times g of x. Then right here, don't forget, minus f of x times g of x all over delta x. So what did I do? I just rewrote this, except right here in the middle I subtracted f of x times g of x plus delta x, and then I added it back in. I'm allowed to do this because this plus this is equal to 0. In all, I didn't do anything to change the answer to this derivative, but I just added these two factors because that's what's going to allow me to compute the derivative of this product. So the first thing I'm going to do is I notice that both of these factors have a g of x plus delta x, g of x plus delta x. So I'm going to pull that out. Lim as delta x goes to 0, g of x plus delta x times this factor, f of x plus delta x minus f of x. Hey, that looks familiar. Let's see what happens over here. Plus, both of these have an f of x, so I'm going to pull that out. F of x times, what do I have left? G of x plus delta x minus g of x. Hey, that looks familiar. And then the delta x, that stays. Okay, let's go ahead and simplify a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to distribute the limit into both of these. I get lim delta x goes to 0, g of x plus delta x times f of x plus delta x minus f of x all over delta x plus lim as delta x goes to 0. Now right here I'm just going to factor out this f of x. I'm going to factor out the f of x because it doesn't have any delta x's in it, and the only thing right here that is important to us is the delta x. So this right here, of course, this is g prime of x. That's the definition of the derivative of g prime. That's the definition of the derivative of g, which is g prime times f of x. Then right here, this part right here, in the black box is f prime of x times, this is the only interesting thing that's left. We have g of x plus delta x. As delta x goes to 0, This part right here goes to 0, and we're just left with g of x. So what does that tell us? The derivative of f times g is f prime g plus g prime f. Check out the next video. We're going to use this in order to prove the quotient rule, which is what do you have when h of x is f of x divided by g to the x. We're going to leverage the product rule in order to compute the quotient rule. Hey, what's going on, guys? Thank you for watching the video. If you're interested in getting better at math by getting all kinds of practice, what I want you to do is go to jumpmathematics.com. Here I provide you with free instructional videos and hundreds of practice problems. This is the best way to get better at math by doing practice problems. See you in the next video.